10% of teenagers vape on a daily basis and 20% vape occasionally.
I would say it's at epidemic proportions.
It's the biggest uncontrolled experiment in human history. We've basically released these chemicals out to people and we've said, right, let's see what happens.
The tactics that they used to use to get teenagers hooked on tobacco products is now the exact same playbook that we're seeing happen in real life now, 50 years later.
And how could something so bright, so colourful, that tastes so good be bad for you?
If the legislation came out and banned flavours, you would have a free-for-all in terms of illicit trade. At every street corner you would be having illegal products sold, and the people who are doing this sort of business are probably not the type of people we want in our communities.
So we've had a number of critical incidents in schools. We had one incident where 2 students' heart rates increased to the point where they became unconscious. Nobody knew what they had taken, nobody knew, they were just found unconscious in the school toilets.
If you'd asked me 2 years ago, I would have said, what's HHC? Because we weren't seeing any cases. And at this point, it's a part of the picture in about a quarter of cases.
Definitely before COVID, it was starting to become a big issue. We could see in the States there was a rise of dual, and we know what happens in the States, happens in Britain, and then happens here. But over the pandemic and ever since then, we've really seen an explosion in youth vaping, and that's been borne out by the stats. We know that 1 in 3 teenagers have ever tried vaping, nearly 1 in 4 are vaping quite regularly, and you chat to any teacher, principal, even university student, they'll all say it's a huge issue.
About 2 to 3 years ago, we really started to notice the incidents of vaping were increasing hugely in schools. And over a short period of time, it became epidemic level in schools, and it became the biggest issue that schools had to deal with. When initially you saw it with the senior students, the 5th and 6th years, but it slowly began to creep back into the 3rd years and the 2nd years. So it became younger and younger students were involving themselves and getting involved in vaping. Whereas traditionally we would have seen senior cycle students would have taken up smoking as they get a little bit older. But vaping became so easy and so popular, and they viewed it as part of their socialisation, so and it was easy, so they took it up.
Like a lot of things, culturally, we take a lot from the US, so there was a lot of data and news coming from the US about the rise of teenage vaping, and that was down to the advent of more user-friendly products that are smaller, cheaper, and also with a very strong marketing campaign and advertising to the youth market. And that was probably about 5 to 10 years ago. And since then, there's really been an explosion in the number of teenagers and young adults vaping.
The most popular product out of the disposables would be the Lost Marys. You have your Lost Marys to 600, your Pineapple Ice would probably be your most popular. So I think because you can smell cigarettes so easily, and you see older people like myself vaping, and you can see other people vaping and their parents are vaping, but you're not getting a smell out of it. I think it's just a sneak tactic amongst the teens because it's so easy to hide in a sense, because you're not really getting a smell off it. And then obviously they're not going to see the health risks. If there is any, because I realistically don't know if there is any, but they're not really seeing it.
It's just the flavours.
Yeah, it's just the flavours. It's just like drinking an energy drink.
Record numbers of them are taking up vaping. I would say it's at epidemic proportions.
A recent review of 65 countries showed that 10% of teenagers vape on a daily basis and 20% vape occasionally. So there is a significant problem out there in regards to teenage vaping.
As school leaders, we noticed, or we thought we had beaten smoking. We'd seen a significant reduction in the number of students smoking. It was not popular to be smoking.
And now we've really left the door open for the vaping companies to come back in and literally target and addict a whole new generation. And we know that adolescents who vape are up to 5 times more likely to start smoking than adolescents who don't vape. So we really have left ourselves open to risking all the progress we've made.
Concern now is that we've seen a bit of a stalling in our tobacco prevalence rate in Ireland. It's stuck at about 18%, and it has been for the last few years. Part of the problem is that if you do have a product out there that is attracting people to nicotine as a product, and that they're more likely to go on to tobacco smoking, that is a major concern.
There's a lot of students that would hide it, and I know I've spoken to school principals who would confiscate vapes off students, and they'd call the parents, and the parents would deny that their child was vaping. Only the evidence was there in front of them. So students are hiding it from their parents, they're hiding it from their teachers. Now, if a student was smoking or an adult was smoking, you can smell it off their breath, you can smell it off their clothes. There is no smell off the vapes, or if there is, it's the smell of a bubble gum or a sweet or something, a perfume that you would expect to smell. So there's no way of knowing unless you physically catch the student with the vape in their mouth. So students would go into the toilets where there are no cameras, and they would be vaping either in the cubicle or in the common areas, and they just walk out with the vape in their pocket and you've no idea.
It's so difficult to police something so small, so compact, so easily hid. And it's not really for the schools. Again, we can't be putting more pressure onto schools and onto teachers. They have a really difficult job as it is, dealing with hundreds of teenagers in their property every single day of the week.
For OGA, our policy is we don't want young people vaping or using any kind of nicotine products during our groups. Look, if they do smoke, that's a reality of life, and if they do vape, that is a reality. And we say, look, our session is an hour and a half long. Before, after, you're fine. Don't do it in the toilets. We have a smoke detector in our bathroom, and the amount of times it's gone off. Young people are going in there, I'll have a cheeky vape, no one will notice. Unfortunately, we do have a smoke detector and it triggers. But yeah, they'll sneak into bathrooms, blowing the smoke down their sleeves. I've heard of young people who are vaping in classrooms, and they can just kind of blow it under the table and it's gone in 2 seconds. There's no big smell, it's kind of fruity, it's juicy. Oh, sorry, I just sprayed perfume. And what I see with the young people that I work with, as they get older, they're going to try because it's safer. They won't try cigarettes because it's like, we know that's bad, but vaping, it's kind of grand, and everyone will give it a go eventually. They might not stick it, but the nature of the vapes nowadays is they're so addictive, and the nicotine levels are so high that if you're in any way inclined to be addictive, then yeah.
In the adolescent addiction services, historically, even though I've been working in this area for 20 years now, we've never really gotten in any way involved in cigarette addiction, even though it is a significant addiction and is obviously associated with lots of long-term medical consequences. But the whole arrival of vaping has really changed that, and pressure has begun to be applied upon us, and I think with some good reason, to sort of get a little bit more involved in nicotine addiction now because of vaping. Nicotine consumed via the traditional cigarette, it sort of acts as a bit of a rate-limiting step in the amount of exposure you get to your nicotine. You've got to inhale smoke into your lungs, and that's physically challenging, certainly initially. So that sort of reduces the dose of nicotine that you get exposed to during your first few weeks or months of cigarette smoking. There's no such limitation with vaping. It seems to me teenagers and sometimes preteens can access these products. They can suck an awful lot of nicotine into themselves, way more than they ever would have managed via smoking. So they're able to get more dependent and more severely dependent way more rapidly than was ever the case.
People are sometimes they're going through a couple of disposable vapes a day. The level of nicotine they're being exposed to, as well as the flavourings they're inhaling, is off the charts.
Nicotine was that's just the addictive part of a cigarette. Sure, it's fine. It's not fine, and I definitely think there is a lack of information, a lack of awareness of what nicotine actually does and what it can do.
Nicotine is one of the most addictive substances on the planet, and we know from studies in the US, from the US Surgeon General, that using nicotine when you're an adolescent can actually harm the development of the brain that controls mood, learning development, impulse control. There is a health impact there, and like I said, it's the younger you start using nicotine, the younger you start vaping, the more addicted you are to it, and the harder it is to quit long term.
It's not fair on people. There are people who take these up out of innocence. They're addicted to it. It's problematic. It It's an onus on public health, on government to make sure that people are prevented from even starting out on this.
At 14, 15, 16 years of age, we all thought we were invincible back then. So they don't see any immediate impact. The immediate impact they can feel would be that the hit that they would get that would give them a little boost of energy from the nicotine. But equally, as that addiction kicks in, students, we start to notice things like irritability, anxiety, a little bits of aggression creeping in, lack of concentration, students just not being focused on the task at hand, on having a reduced concentration span. And that becomes much worse as students try to wean off the nicotine addiction. Sleeplessness, parents might notice that at home, that they're not sleeping well, they're waking up tired, it's hard to get them out of bed in the morning, that they don't follow through on their actions. And we're seeing all of that in schools. And the big fear is that they are doing themselves the damage that they're not going to reach their potential. But there will be a genuine belief among teachers that it is having a significant impact on students, and it is contributing to potentially students underperforming in state exams. But the addiction creates the impression in the student that they need this to cope, and that they can't cope without this, and this is what's getting them through. And that is the worrying part of it.
It's really important that teenagers are aware of that nicotine is not something they should be using. It's just not a product that we should expose any of our teenagers' lungs or brains to.
The project came about after the report, What's Panic About Vaping? So that was commissioned by the Drugs Task Force and the ETB and Mairéad, and it was looking at vaping habits of young people 10 to 18 in Sligo Leitrim. And then there was recommendations came out of that, and one of them was some sort of campaign to raise awareness about, first of all, the new laws that have come in, and then kind of the wider effects of vaping. So we had a little subgroup that was set up and came up with an idea, why don't we try and make a film? And so we reached out to our local connections of young people in Sligo Leitrim. We got a filmmaker, we got some funding, and we said, right, let's start making some films.
I think it's a big issue, especially coming into secondary school age, like 13, 14. I've definitely seen it get more popular. It's sad really to think that how popular it's getting.
You can't go down to the shop or even go for a walk without seeing vapes anywhere, really.
My older sister is a teacher, and she was doing a class with her second years, asking them about vaping, and they thought it was water vapor. They didn't know, obviously, about the nicotine and all that stuff in it. So definitely, I say not enough people know about all the health risks, especially since it was first advertised as like a healthier alternative to smoking.
Vaping is so new. It's, one way of looking at it is it's the biggest uncontrolled experiment in human history. We've basically released these chemicals out to people and we said, right, let's see what happens. Developmentally, it's really hard for young people to think about the long-term impact. So what we focused on is kind of the short-term impact, how it will affect your daily life, how it affects you immediately, the financial impact, immediate health impacts. And I think a lot of young people had never really thought about that because a lot of the rhetoric is, it'll kill you in 20 years' time, maybe. Whereas we focused on, this is what we know it will actually affect.
I do know it's harder to do sports and stuff. With vapes, it can make it harder to breathe and things like that.
You can't really be an athlete with a bad lungs or bad heart because you can't run fast anyway. You can't be active anyway. So that's already killed your dream of being an athlete. So it's not good. Yeah.
I told about my friend she cannot do any of sports because of this, and she was addicted to it. It's like whatever. If I take her to a sport, like for example running. She can't. She run for a minute, even not a minute, 20 seconds, she stop. It's because of vaping. She run, then her heart.
There's more flavors, raspberry, blueberry, more maybe berries. So they not smell like cigarettes. So, and I think that why teenagers more vapes than cigarettes.
There's flavors cherry cola and like Skittles and stuff like that. It's obviously marketing toward younger people, which maybe it's not intentional, maybe it is, I don't know, but it's definitely not doing any more good. So I feel like if they just either got rid of most of the flavors or just stopped doing the flavors, I think that would have helped with the big epidemic around vaping.
What is vaping but an opportunity for tobacco companies to take something that was initially a nicotine replacement therapy for people who want to quit and rebrand it as something that is cool and stylish and safer than smoking. Look, maybe it is safer than smoking, but regardless of that, it has been targeted towards young people. The colours, the flavours, the designs.
We're dressing something up like it's innocent, like it's healthy, like it's a lifestyle choice, like it's like going for a run and, you know, it's all love. It's not. It's bad for your health.
The tobacco industry have seen that vaping is the way back in, and so they've been buying out e-cigarette companies. They've been launching new e-cigarette products purely to attract a whole new demographic, a whole new cohort of young people.
A gap is opened up and a gap will be filled. It's not surprising. That's business, that's economics. Do we need to regulate it? Do we need to prevent it from growing any further? Absolutely, yes. It's not a surprise that these industries are moving and morphing into one.
Actually, there isn't a big tobacco company out there that hasn't invested in some form or other in vaping companies. The tactics that they used to use to get teenagers hooked on tobacco products is now the exact same playbook that we're seeing happen in real life now, 50 years later.
British American Tobacco is a company that sells tobacco and nicotine products, founded in 1905, and today we're in 145 markets around the world. Selling products from cigarettes, heated tobacco products, vape products and nicotine pouches. I have three main accountabilities. One is to assess the safety of our products, two, to ensure they're legal compliant in all the markets that we're in, and three, to lead the scientific research programs to assess the risk of our smokeless products relative to smoking. We've been very, very clear in all of our public documentation and policies around we believe the flavours should be restricted to tobacco, menthol and mint and some fruits. We've called for bans on beverage and confectionery type flavours. There's absolutely no place in smokeless products for these brand names like unicorn juice and this sort of stuff. It should be strictly on the brand and the flavours. And even things like the packaging format can't be youth inspired. This has to be completely adult inspired because that's the ambition, that we want to move adult smokers to smokeless products.
They are designed for children, of course they are. How could anyone think anything otherwise? Obviously they will deny that and they'll deny that forever, but we shouldn't be silly enough to believe them. They will do what's in their shareholders' interests, which is to lie to us about this. Of course, flavours like that are designed for teenagers. They need a new generation of people addicted to their products. Like cigarette addiction, the best definition I heard of it many, many years ago was that it's a pediatric addiction that persists into adulthood. The cigarette industry knew that. 90% of the adults they had hooked on cigarettes became hooked as children. And the vaping industry knows that its future lies in addicting children to nicotine. And as a society, we, over the last 5 or 6 years, have just stood idly by while they have done so.
The access of youth to tobacco products should be absolutely forbidden. That's our number one priority, is to prevent youth from accessing these here products. Because for us, we believe there's two jobs to be done. The first one is the prevention of these products to youth. The second being access to adult smokers. We need to make sure that we have a regulated regime, such as we will have in Ireland in the coming months, that gives adult smokers optionality around availability of the products at retail, but also many of the product features that facilitates the switch, flavours, nicotine, etc. I can't talk for every company, but that's why regulations are so important, because the regulator dictates a certain standard in terms of product manufacture, the quality of the products and the assessment of it. And I think the industry would be much better if everyone adhered to those standards set by the regulators.
Every single town around the country we see vape shops. Yes, absolutely, the horse is bolted. And quite often in many countries, not only in Ireland, the legislation has to catch up with society. Action is needed, and it has been needed a few years ago.
Unfortunately, Ireland has been really slow in addressing this issue. Other countries like Hungary have done amazing work. Australia as well, limiting the flavours, the colours, limiting the sales, making it harder. In Ireland, we brought in these new laws, which our first film is about, but actually we've seen very little change. Very, very little change. A lot of the retailers are still selling to school students in their uniforms. Young people are still easily getting vapes. There has been no dramatic change.
The students who were using the vapes would have developed an addiction, and you're dealing with addictive behaviour. So banning the vapes alone, while a very good start, and may make it more difficult for younger students to start, there are a whole cohort of students that have already started, and we have put no interventions in place for those students to support those students, because they're going around the legal system and they will enter the black market to get the vape that they want, and that puts it into a very worrying position because it's unregulated and we've no idea what they're getting in that vape.
When tobacco products became popular back in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, we really didn't know what the impact of these products would have on our health. And it was only maybe 20, 30 years later that we eventually found out the real dangers to tobacco products. And I think we're probably going to see a similar pattern with vaping. As I said, I don't think they're as harmful as tobacco products, but there is harm there that will occur with chronic vaping, and I think we need to be cognizant of that, and we need to let people know. But as a paediatrician as well, teenagers vaping, the developing lungs is a real concern of respiratory paediatricians across the world. Your lungs are still developing as a teenager, and it's not safe for teenagers to inhale these products.
In relation to the ingredients for the vape itself, ingredients that we don't actually know enough about, ingredients that were never meant for human consumption. There is evidence there that there's, pulmonary damage. It's different to the damage that's done by cigarettes, but it's equally as bad in many cases.
But the flavourings are something that were developed by food companies for us to consume and eat, and they've been now repurposed as a flavouring that are being inhaled into the lungs. So that immediately, would ring alarm bells, and it has been shown that these flavourings probably do cause some irritation and inflammation to the lungs. Again, what that means for 20, 30 years down the track, that's yet to pan out.
So for us, that's really important. And we have a product stewardship process. So we start off with a negative list of ingredients that we would permit and ingredients that we would not permit. We have a group of 60 toxicologists. They look at the ingredients, they look at the ingredients in the aerosol to make sure they haven't degraded during the aerosolization process. And so we believe that we can deliver flavoured aerosols that are while not completely risk-free, substantially lower risk profile relative to smoking.
There is a fear that we don't know what's in the vape. We assume it's nicotine or tobacco or whatever it is, but there are increasing reports that THC and CBD oil are in the vapes. So we've had a number of critical incidents in schools. We had one incident where 2 students' heart rates increased to the point where they became unconscious. Nobody knew what they had taken, nobody knew, they were just found unconscious in the school toilets.
The Irish Bishops' Drugs Initiative is in place about 25 years now. It's there quite a while, and we are very happy with it. We think it's a good outreach. It's a good response to what is a pastoral need as well as a social need in our society. And as far as I know, I think we're the only Bishops' Conference in Europe that have such a pastoral outreach relating to drugs and the use of illegal drugs. Hexahydrocannabinol, I only heard about it in the last 3 to 4 months. It came to our attention when a mother of a 17-year-old girl wrote to the Irish Bishops' Drugs Initiative, and she had written to quite a few other representatives, public representatives across the country as well, because of the situation that her 17-year-old daughter found herself in. She had bought HHC in the vape shop and had become addicted to it quite quickly, and unfortunately had serious psychotic episodes as a result of that, had to give up school, have to be under a treatment of a psychiatrist, a psychologist.
HHC is a drug I really first became aware of probably midway through 2023. Never heard of it before that at all. What it is a semi-synthetic cannabinoid, and what that means in simple language is that it's one of the chemicals that exists naturally within the cannabis plant, actually CBD in this case, has been chemically modified to cause it to act in really quite a similar way to THC, which is the chemical in cannabis that really has all the psychoactive effects, the stoned effects, the addictive effects, and I suppose the concerning mental health effects that we can sometimes see with cannabis. Unfortunately, it is widely available, and I'm sort of confused to some extent as to how it remains so widely available for so long, given that doctors have been expressing concern about it for about a year and a half at this stage. But yeah, it's available online, it's available in shops. Not every vape store sells it. It tends to be maybe the more specialist ones, the ones that maybe sell CBD type products. But yeah, they sell HHC, openly advertised and available.
Perfectly legal.
Well, not illegal is the way I would put it. It's not that anyone has assessed it and decided, okay, this chemical deserves to be available for the Irish public to consume. It's the opposite hasn't occurred. It's more the case that we haven't actually made a determination that it should be banned, unlike many other European countries. I think it's banned in about 15 European countries at this stage.
There was nothing legally being done about the fact that her daughter, at 17 years of age, was able to go into a vape shop and with her own credit card buy this vape, HHC, which had such terrible effects upon her.
It doesn't fall, as far as I can see, under any regulatory sort of control. It's not treated as a food product. Like the ham sandwich I had at lunchtime today is vastly more regulated and managed than HHC is. My job, I suppose, brings me into contact with teenagers who developed addiction issues, and that's where I began to encounter HHC, where it's, I suppose, accounted for an increasing proportion of referrals to our services, sometimes in combination with other drugs, sometimes on its own. If you'd asked me 2 years ago, I would have said, what's HHC? Because we weren't seeing any cases. And at this point, it's a part of the picture in about a quarter of cases.
One young man who attended his Deb's dance, and he had never taken a vape before. He was given a vape at the function and took 4 or 5 puffs of it and passed out completely, and he was in hospital literally in a coma state for about 3 days afterwards. So it's very obvious that this substance shouldn't be on sale across our country, and that the means are there to ban it, or at least to control the sale of it. And that's basically what we're looking for.
I've had a lot of emails and correspondence from very worried parents with their children who've gone into psychosis after taking the HHC. It's very, very worrying. I put in a parliamentary question to the minister a couple of weeks ago. Her response was that it is a drug of concern at the minute, and it will be legislated for very soon. It'll be moved to a Schedule 1 drug, and that's the strictest control, the tightest control we have under the Misuse of Drugs Act.
The main motivation for teenagers to use any drugs is actually curiosity and pleasure seeking and fun seeking. And that can sometimes be driven by, it can be a group activity, and then they can get swept along. One person in the group is maybe the most curious, and others just sort of, join in. So there's that peer influence as well. Where people are struggling with some pre-existing mental health or other psychological problem, I suppose, particularly if they find on the short term that the drug use, if HHC or whatever drug, if they find some short-term relief, that can be very reinforcing. And I guess people with those underlying issues might be more likely to develop a problematic pattern of use.
It's only natural to think that, once a person has been introduced to that experience, that they will look for something more, that they will look for the harder drug and progress into a much more difficult situation. So I think it's perfectly feasible that the vapes that are legally being sold are a gateway into some harder drug use.
15 years ago was 2010, and that's actually when we had the head shops. So we had synthetic cannabinoids, fully synthetic cannabinoids then, which were, I suppose I would agree that they were worse than either cannabis or HHC. But there was uproar. There was people marching on the streets looking to get these shops shut down. That was the degree of public concern that existed at that time about the mental health and addiction problems that those drugs were causing. And right now, the public seem utterly oblivious to this new drug, which I accept isn't quite as bad as those old ones. But I just worry that we're sort of sleepwalking back down the same path, quite similar to the head shops 15 years ago.
I remember the head shop legislation. I was working in the Senate at the time. My local TD, Dermot Ahern, he was the minister at the time. He was responsible for banning those head shops. I think that was an incredibly welcome move. Again, that horse had bolted and the world didn't fall apart when we took those shops away and we banned them. Things moved on, and in the long run, we have saved the lives and saved the quality of lives of so many families, so many people. It's a good thing. And the new legislation to ban and to control the HSE is absolutely important, and it can't come soon enough.
If you're an adult long-term smoker and you've chosen to vape to cut down or quit smoking, that's great, because e-cigarettes are safer, but e-cigarettes are not harm-free, and we're really concerned that we're setting up a whole new generation of young people to become addicted to nicotine. We know that e-cigarettes are not safe. There was a study in the European Heart Journal in about 2019 which showed that e-cigarettes can damage the brain, the heart, the lung, blood vessels.
Vaping is a product that offers consumers a lower risk product in terms of nicotine. So it's not risk-free. Nicotine is addictive, but it doesn't have tobacco, it doesn't have combustion, and therefore has substantially reduced levels of harmful chemicals in the aerosol. And it's these harmful chemicals are what can cause smoking-related diseases, and that's why organisations like Public Health England have said that vaping could be 95% safer than smoking. We believe it's okay for somebody to use nicotine over many years. We would much prefer now that we have these smokeless products that they would use these smokeless products rather than smoke. So in that respect, for us, we could see a future where, and we've actually said to the markets that we can see a world where we're a predominantly smokeless business, selling more smokeless products than cigarettes.
The pro-vapor argument, which is obviously all funded by industry, is that these products can assist some people move away from the horrors of cigarette smoking. That remains somewhat equivocal, and the HSE advice certainly is that vaping is not a smoking cessation method that it recommends. It's possible, maybe, trying to be really open-minded towards people who find vaping helpful and it's helped them move away from cigarettes. Then, fine, have it as a prescription item hidden behind a counter from your pharmacist, and that should be the only location, not advertised or promoted anywhere.
It's promoted as a tobacco product. What we want is consumers to have the opportunity and the options to select products that are for them. So that's why we believe that we need to have regulations that offer the opportunity for smokers to have access to these lower risk profile products like vaping and like the nicotine pouches.
There are papers that show that vapes help people get off cigarettes, but if you look at large systematic reviews, the evidence is very mixed on the benefits of switching over from tobacco cigarettes to vapes. The other issue is a lot of people who vape dual use, so the 40% of vapers will still smoke tobacco products. So, and that looks to be very much a more harmful pattern than just doing one or the other. The other aspect of this is that, the other products that we have to help people get off tobacco products have been medically proven to be safe. Whereas in vaping is clearly a consumer product. It's been marketed and advertised as a consumer product. It's, across, why would they have bubblegum flavour? Why would they have banana, whatever it is, flavour, if they're not marketing this to, the youth market?
So you're quitting cigarettes to stop taking toxins into your system, but yet you move on to something that we don't know what is in it. The ingredients were not meant for human consumption. So I really genuinely don't believe that they are the best way, and they shouldn't be seen as that.
Very clearly, flavoured vapes are aimed at children, are aimed at young people. So legislating for the banning of those is an important start, that they're not available. And again, back to the school situation, the majority of young people will comply with that. So I think it is a really good start, but we need to keep a spotlight on it. We need to keep the focus on it, and it needs to be a priority to make sure that this is embedded into the culture, that we don't have more students taking the vape.
Now it's time to legislate. And working with the minister responsible, spoke to her this week about it. She says they're working on that bill. They're hoping to have that bill very soon. But again, the emphasis is when is soon, how fast can we do it? Because this is really important. I don't have any dates. It's with the Attorney General at the minute. It's been drafting. The heads of the bill were there. What was mooted at the time was that there would be a complete ban on disposable vapes, ban on flavours, also the ban on targeted advertising in general shops. They'll be all banned as well.
It'll lead to carnage in terms of illegal products coming into the country. Even though we're in Ireland, huge access through the UK and through Northern Ireland, it will become awash with disposables. That's what will happen. They will not be regulated. Like, we get any disposables come into this country, because we deal with most of the suppliers, we get them independently tested and we send the results to the HSE. So at least at least you have a good idea what's coming in. It'll be like the Wild West.
I do think there is a role for disposables in terms of they're very convenient and simple to use, so potentially even for older people. But it has to be done responsibly, and any ban on any product, it has to be enforced. Otherwise, you risk having unsafe product brought into the marketplace, and you create this massive black market.
We hear this argument constantly from different lobby groups. We hear black market as an argument to do nothing constantly. It is a public health issue, and I do not buy that argument that just because a black market could be created, it should not be a reason to do nothing in the sake of a public health good.
This is something that the tobacco industry would have historically put out there, that whenever countries would introduce a piece of tobacco legislation, they would always bring out that argument that, you're just creating a black market, etc. Every step of the way, when countries like Ireland have introduced tobacco legislation, we haven't seen a massive spike in increase in black market sales of tobacco products. So it's just not true that would happen. Well, we would be obviously, there is a black market, and it should be, there should be enforcement there. There should be, resources put into that. But there's really no evidence that will actually happen in real life when such measures like the ban on disposable vapes, restrictions on marketing will happen.
If the legislation come out and banned flavours, essentially what you would see is that certain consumer groups would just go for illicit product. We've seen that in many, many markets around the world. So instead of a government putting forward a very clear and logical regulatory roadmap and getting the benefits of that regulatory roadmap in terms of excise and taxation, etc., you would have a free-for-all in terms of illicit trade. At every street corner you would be having illegal products sold, and the people who are doing this sort of business are probably not the type of people we want in our communities.
People will still have access to vapes. It's not that we're, asking to remove them altogether from the market. But we would like to see in Ireland that vapes are not easily accessible for teenagers. That if adults choose to purchase a vaping product, and that they can choose to do so if they want.
So I initially went on to the vapes because they banned the flavour cigarettes. Now, I was smoking nearly 40 fags a day, And that was only because you got smoke breaks in my last workplace. But I was smoking the menthol cigarettes, and then they banned those. So then I went on to the menthol, and then all the different flavours came out, and then I was straight on to the vapes. So,
how many vapes do you go through a day or a week?
So with these small disposable ones, they probably would have lasted me about, I would say, about a day and a half, 2 days, if I'm not overly pulling off them constantly. These ones here, the 2,400, they probably would have they used to last me about 4 days. My partner hated me smoking cigarettes. He doesn't like me smoking them, but sure, it is what it is.
And if they took away the flavours in the morning, would you still vape?
Probably not.
We know that it's not just the here and now, we need to start looking at the long-term impact of this, that we don't know what it will be, but we're well enough educated and experienced to know that there are going to be long-term impacts of vaping.
The substances that are appearing nowadays, people aren't really ready for them. There's sort of a mystery about them for a long time, and it's not until we see the hard evidence effectively over a period of time that these are having a major effect on our young people.
We've submitted our policies to multiple governments around the world. It's around the flavours, it's around the descriptors, it's around the packaging, and it's the accessibility in the marketplace. And I think the additional thing we'd really like to see is education. I think if there could be clear education from public health authorities, governments, around the benefits of these products, albeit we put the controls in place around things like youth access, retail licensing, etc. I think we could really see the benefit of these here products in terms of population health impact.
You know, we would never encourage someone to take up cigarettes. We shouldn't encourage someone to take up vaping. We wouldn't, be happy about our child coming in with a box of fags. We shouldn't be, being soft on vapes. We just shouldn't be. It's bad for your health. It's bad for your child's health. And if you get, your teenager who is, sneaking vapes in, it shouldn't just be, it's like, oh, sure, we all did it. Yes, we might have, people might have had cigarettes when they were younger, and sure, what's wrong with me now? Well, we don't know what path your child will take. Will they get addicted to that? Will they get addicted to other things? Will it affect their health, their growth? You're better erring on the side of caution, and prevention is so much cheaper, better, and healthier than cure.